The metal key was jingling on the living room table right in front of him. Yet, deep within the dark, hollow space beneath the floorboards, something was scraping back and forth against the damp joists. Ethan stood frozen near the cellar doorway, staring down into the darkness. A faint metallic click echoed up through the drafty floor vents, followed by the soft sound of deliberate breathing coming from inside the hollow interior wall. Outside, the family car sat running in the snow-covered driveway, with its headlights beaming into the night, perfectly empty. In that quiet second, a chilling realization took hold of his mind. The parents had never driven away at all. They were still inside the walls. To understand why that cold draft still makes Ethan double-check every closet in his house, we have to go back to late November of 2018. He was a 19-year-old college student, taking odd jobs to pay his winter tuition in rural Vermont, when a family living on an isolated mountain road posted a high-paying listing for a weekend babysitter. He accepted immediately. The arrangement seemed completely standard. He was hired to watch 4-year-old Clara from 7 in the evening until midnight, while her parents attended a dinner event in town. But looking back now, the small, unsettling details were already plain to see from the moment he pulled into their gravel driveway. The house was a heavy 2-story colonial surrounded by dense pine trees. When Ethan stepped onto the front porch, Mrs. Miller opened the door immediately. She was wearing a thick winter coat, her purse slung over her shoulder, appearing in a rushed hurry to leave. She spoke quickly, gesturing toward the kitchen, where young Clara was quietly eating supper. Mrs. Miller handed Ethan a slip of paper with the Wi-Fi password and emergency numbers, then stepped outside onto the snowy porch. As she closed the door behind her, Ethan heard the heavy deadbolt slide into place with a loud iron thud. He assumed she had locked it with her key from the outside. By 8 in the evening, Ethan had tucked young Clara into bed on the upper floor. The house became remarkably quiet, save for the rhythmic groan of the heating pipes and the whistling wind against the window panes. Settling onto the living room sofa, Ethan picked up the handwritten instruction sheet from the kitchen counter. Near the bottom, written in dark cursive ink, was a brief note. It instructed him to keep the cellar door locked at all times, and under no circumstances to open the small utility access panel built into the hallway wall. The note claimed the house had old exposed wiring that was dangerous to touch. It sounded reasonable enough at the time. Around 10 in the evening, Ethan received a text message from Mr. Miller stating that traffic was heavy on Route 9 and they would be home slightly after midnight. Ethan replied politely and walked to the kitchen to fetch a glass of water. As he reached for a cup, something on the counter caught his eye. Resting right next to the fruit bowl was Mrs. Miller's primary key ring, complete with her house keys and car fob. Ethan stared at the shiny brass key for a long moment. He remembered hearing the heavy front deadbolt slide shut from the outside when she left. If her keys were sitting right here on the counter, how had she locked it? He tried to rationalize the missing key, telling himself perhaps Mr. Miller had unlocked the door from outside earlier, or they kept a spare set near the porch. But at 11 in the evening, a new sound disrupted the silence. It began as a faint, rhythmic thumping beneath the living room floorboards. It was not the erratic metallic clang of the radiator or the house settling in the freezing temperatures. It was slow, deliberate, and paced like footsteps. Ethan walked softly across the rug, listening intently. The sound shifted, moving from under the rug directly toward the back of the hallway wall, creeping upward into the interior structure of the house. Driven by growing unease, Ethan walked down the narrow, carpeted hallway toward the utility access panel mentioned in the note. The wall around the small wooden panel felt surprisingly warm to the touch. He leaned his ear against the painted wood and heard a dry, rustling sound, like synthetic fabric rubbing against raw wooden studs. Instinctively, he reached out and rattled the brass latch on the small door. The moment his fingers made contact with the cold metal, the rustling inside the wall stopped completely. The sudden silence was suffocating. It felt as if whatever was standing inside the dark cavity behind the drywall was listening to him from mere inches away. At precisely midnight, bright headlights swept across the living room blinds. Ethan felt an overwhelming wave of relief, believing the parents had finally returned. He watched through the front window as the dark SUV pulled into the driveway, its engine idling quietly in the falling snow. But 5 minutes passed, and no one got out of the vehicle. The driver's side door remained shut, and the interior light never turned on. Concerned that something was wrong, Ethan put on his boots, stepped onto the porch, and approached the running car. The snow around the vehicle was completely undisturbed. There were no footprints leading away from the car whatsoever. Ethan peeked through the tinted driver window and froze. The SUV was completely empty. The engine was running, the heat was blowing, but the driver's seat was vacant. A spare key was resting in the ignition. Panic seized him as he rushed back toward the house. If you are feeling the dread of this quiet discovery, please like the video and subscribe to support the channel. As Ethan stepped back through the front door, he looked down the dark hallway. The small utility access panel on the wall was swinging wide open. A pair of wet, muddy winter boots rested neatly inside the exposed cavity beneath the staircase structure. The horrifying reality clicked into place. Mrs. Miller had never left the property. The running car had been set on a remote starter, or started from inside the garage hours earlier, to create the illusion of an arrival. The footsteps he had heard moving inside the walls were not an intruder entering from the outside. The parents were hiding within a network of hollow framing and hidden access spaces built inside the house itself, watching his every move through the wall vents. Why they were lurking in the dark while an unsuspecting sitter watched their child was a question that chilled him to the very core of his soul. Ethan did not wait to find out their motives. He sprinted up the stairs, lifted sleeping Clara into his arms, wrapped her in a heavy blanket, and bolted out the front door into the freezing night. He ran as fast as his feet could carry him down the long gravel drive toward the main road, never looking back until he reached the neighboring house a mile away. The neighbor quickly ushered them inside and dialed 911. As Ethan stood by the window waiting for the police, he looked across the dark valley toward the Miller house. Through the distant trees, he watched as the second-floor lights turned off, one by one. When state troopers searched the residence an hour later, they found the house completely deserted. The cellar wall panel led to a claustrophobic crawl space running between the outer structure and interior drywall, fitted with sleeping pads, small battery-powered lanterns, and silent observation slits looking into every room. Yet the parents were nowhere to be found, having fled into the surrounding woods before officers arrived. To this day, investigators have never located Mr. and Mrs. Miller, nor established their true identities or reasons for constructing such a nightmare. Today, Ethan refuses to enter multi-story homes and always checks the floor registers whenever he enters a new room. Some monsters do not lurk in the woods. Sometimes they are built right into the places where we feel most safe, quietly listening from behind the plaster. If this story left you looking twice at the shadows in your hallway, please hit the like button and subscribe for more alleged encounters. Have you ever felt a presence in a house that felt far too close for comfort? Share your story in the comments below. We read every single one. Until next time, keep your doors locked, look closely at your walls, and stay safe in the dark.